Hey, hello and welcome back to the Comic Literate Podcast, the podcast that does deep dives into the best of comic books, graphic novels, mangas, and penny dreadfuls. I'm your host, the soon-to-be-known as Comic Stan, and with me, as always, is my zestful co-host, it's Jamie.
You zestful again.
Even though I was being... What, again? Is this the first? I'm going to have to edit this out if it is.
There was a whole thing about zestful. Do you not remember?
Was it not a different one?
No, it was zestful.
I've got a thing. I did. Oh, that's punishable. I'm going to have to stop the whole bit now.
You fucked it.
Yeah.
You're going to have to carry on, but you fucked it.
We've got to leave it in out of authenticity.
You know, I was in a good mood.
And then I called you that's what I fucked it. I mean, you have a better memory of these things, which actually is a compliment to me, because you're actually remembering these words I've picked out. But you would think to be honest, the list that I'm using for like uncommon descriptive terms, I was like, I haven't done Z in a while, and there's only 2 in Z, and I just immediately went back into like, ooh, zestful, that's a nice word.
What was the other Z for zebra one?
A common description. You're very zebra-like, you know that? I'll have to open it again if you just give me...
The actual phonetic is a little bit culturally insensitive, isn't it?
What, zebra?
Well, no, the actual phonetic alphabet for Z.
Oh, Zulu?
Yeah.
Yeah. It was made by Brits, for sure.
Yeah, absolutely.
The other Z word I could have picked, which I should have picked, was zealous.
See, now zealous, I would have been overzealous if anything to have been called zealous today.
Yeah, and unlike the big 2 comic distributors, we can't just retcon the past as if it never happened. So I mean,
we have done that once before.
I mean, as far as the
audience, got on our cosmic treadmill.
Yes, we rewound time or went forward in time, or whichever ones you prefer.
Whichever way it went, I don't remember anymore.
It was definitely the Spider-Man episode. I know, into the future, just for my own Futurama reference of "Welcome to the world of tomorrow."
Oh, we love it. So how are you? How are you doing?
Good. I'm energetic. I'm ready to go. I had one of those moments earlier when I was thinking about, God, be high energy for the podcast. And the thought that really got it across for me was, I did genuinely think, how lucky is it that I was able to find someone in my life that I could put this podcast together with.
Aww.
And that made me, and not even just like a complimentary way to you, like not even just like to big you up or anything, just genuinely like, how many people have someone in their life who go, we should start a lot of people say we should start a podcast. Very few people, I think, actually start one that goes well.
Yeah, and we have been doing this for a while now.
For what we can't even, but when it's been a good time, you don't remember how long it's been. So it could have been a year, could have been 10 years.
8 or 9 months or something, isn't it?
Something like that, yeah. I mean, go by the number of episodes, but I had that thought and I went, I'm privileged to be able to do this, to be in a situation where we can set all this up and get all the gear and technology together and everything. And that gave me a little bit of a, yeah, come on, let's do this. You know?
And then you walked in and said zestful, and I was like, right, you're a fucking dick.
I've quit the podcast now. But otherwise, I'm in good spirits. How about you?
Yeah, I mean, I've realised that my cat's a little flea bag. So I'm less than thrilled with her.
In the very literal term. Not even like a cat derogatory term.
Nah, she's just a big old bag of fleas, and I'm it's the first time dealing with it.
Yeah, that's perils of pet ownership, unfortunately. And you made it quite far to get to this point first.
Yeah, I know, right? Which kind of makes it worse. So I've just been smothering her in ointments and untuits and, you know, like the ape that I am, grooming her by hand.
Have you thought about getting one of those birds that picks ticks out of like rhinos or something?
Do you know what? I considered it, but then they have their own parasites and it just ends up being...
We brought you in to get less parasites, not more parasites.
Exactly.
That sounds like an old 50s sketch, kind of like, oh, I thought it'd be a good idea, sir.
I saw the Simpsons episode, thought better of it.
I mean, they do that job, but I didn't know about the additional parasites, so that's news to me.
Absolutely. You don't want bird ticks.
You think
they're airborne.
The birds that pick the ticks off, you'd be like, you've got your own ticks, mate. Worry about that first. And if there's hard to reach places, 2 birds tick each other.
You definitely would tick each other?
Yeah, that's the to tick or de-tick.
Jamie, can we hang out at yours now? I'm really sorry, mate. I've got 2 birds ticking each other off at home.
Yeah. And the problem is a cat especially, you bring a bird in that's small enough that it's just going to be like, ooh, dinner.
It's
like,
prey, isn't it?
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's like, no, he's working for us. He's the help. You don't eat the help.
If I hadn't already written it off as an idea, I think this conversation would have been enough to deter me.
Well, this is why we do it. This is why, so people listening at home, they know if they're in the similar situation, Maybe if you got a mellow dog, like a big dog that's quite mellow, you could get one of them in for that.
Yeah.
But, best not to risk it. Maybe there's other parasites. Maybe it's illegal. I have no idea. I'm not an expert on bird law.
Imagine if it is. Yeah, there's just a law against working birds that went through Parliament in the 16th century.
Yeah, but I think people were underpaying them. That was the problem.
Absolutely.
It was like a slave wage or something.
Yeah, just unreasonable working hours.
Yeah, there's those big bird protests of the 1840s.
Yes, I know. Yeah, the bird. Yeah, I mean, Gladstone managed to quell them.
Yeah.
But
is this our version of the Jungle Canyon rope bridges? And if anyone knows that reference, well done.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good
That's
on
a
ya.
deep cut.
Deep cut. So, speaking of whatever it is we were just speaking of, we are here again today to actually do something slightly unusual. I feel I've said that in a few episodes.
Yeah,
but
this is cool.
This even more so because we're doing not one, not three or any higher, but 2 titles this week.
Absolutely.
And I thought, what is the most elaborate way I can go about saying that?
Well, he was.
Yes, exactly. You've seen the title, so you've seen the franchise. We are doing, of course, and ready for it? Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, Heroes in a Half Shell. Turtle Power!
Turtle Power!
Through to you. I mean, that was like a bit of like a...
Yeah, I didn't, like, that was...
It would have been amazing if you'd got it. It was worth the risk of like, throwing it to you. You fucked it. But yes, we're doing the one and only Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, because, well, especially while we're doing 2 titles, is you actually had this idea to do the very beginning...
Yeah.
And one of the more recent ones to see, because it's such a widespread franchise, see, especially specifically within comics.
Yeah.
So other franchises, I think most people, like your general everyday, your civilians, your normies. I don't think many people know that the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are a comic original character and franchise. Yeah. So you thought it'd be good to do the start and the modern, and compare them.
At least just to have a look at it. And do you know what? I didn't do as much prep as you for this episode, I'm going to be honest. Having dipped my toe into both titles, there are some key differences.
Yes.
And there are some really key points of interest. I mean, even just looking at the way that the art styles evolved, Jesus Christ.
I've got a lot to say on the art styles.
Yeah.
On both titles. So if it's not in the title, because I haven't written it yet or whatever, so we're doing the original 1984 first issues. So like the very first comics of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles.
Yeah.
And then we're jumping all the way to, I think it was 2020? 2020.
During the old pandemo.
When the TMNT, The Last Ronin came out, which was well received as a good Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles comic. So we'll get into that and see what we think. I thought a good place to start would be just going into a little bit of our own experiences of the franchise, because it's one of those ones that's been around for our entire lives.
Yeah, for us, certainly.
In such various ways. So you can say that with things like, Star Wars has always been around for us, and other, like James Bond is a long-running one.
Yeah.
But they, I think, have much more traditional mediums, so like mostly films and all. And, you got your other stuff, your books and your games, whatever, but Teenage Mutant... I'm going to say TMNT. I'm going to use that abbreviation from now on. TMNT is a very weird one because it doesn't feel like any one medium is the defining one. And that's including the comics where they started. Because, like I said, most people don't know.
I didn't realise they started in comics.
Proving my point, yeah.
I thought it was a toy line that had comics and cartoons made to sell it.
And toys have absolutely been one of the biggest parts of it, for sure.
Yeah.
I think everything else was made to advertise the toys.
Yeah.
Like with a lot of franchises, especially anything kid-related.
But it was the 80s. That's how they did in the 80s, wasn't it?
And what's especially, we'll get into it, but what's especially interesting is how it started, like the style and the medium it was. But I thought it'd be cool, like I said, what is your personal experience growing up? Did you dip your toe in at all, or is any kind of bits of it that you enjoyed growing up?
There was a cartoon that I liked. The one that you just reminded me of the intro for.
So with that, the original 80s cartoon, I think? The one with April O'Neil in the yellow jumpsuit, that look.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So episodes of that came into my household on VHS from the library.
Right.
in the like late 90s.
And was that like did you pick it out, or was that like you're a kid, you'll like this?
No, it was like I picked up that and the Sonic the Hedgehog cartoon.
Right.
Like just a few. There was a few cartoons that like weren't syndicated on TV.
Did that feel kind of like the 80s felt like the time period where the connection between make a cartoon and then sell toys and make bank? Do you think that was the first time that kind of hit? Because it seemed like a lot of TV shows.
Absolutely. Yeah, the 80s were all about that. I mean, that's where He-Man came from. That's certainly the model that Power Rangers was using. And I grouped TMNT in with that purely because my first exposure to it was the original cartoon, which I think came out in the late 80s.
I reckon so, yeah.
Yeah, and I just remember it being really cool, and they liked pizza, and I liked pizza.
They were mutants.
And I'm a mutant. They were mutants, and all the other kids at school thought I was really weird, so that kind of made a lot of sense.
They were unusually big for their age. In some iterations, I think. They're cool teenagers, but they're definitely adult size, if not more.
Absolutely. And then one of my friend's older brothers was from the 80s because he was a bit older than us, and he had
Who's your brother? He's from the 80s.
Yeah. He's like a good 10 years older than us, and so he had been kicking about collecting comic books in the 90s, and I'm pretty sure he had I was exposed to like One Piece and the original Dragon Ball series, and then some other kind of weird and wonderful comics. And there was some Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle stuff there. And now, having read a little bit of the original run, I think that's what he had.
Right.
And so I'd seen a bit of it in like one of my friend's older brother's comic book collections,
Yeah. So for me, I've definitely dipped my toe in and out of the franchise throughout the years.
Yeah.
My first interaction, I think, properly with it, because I think I saw bits of the original cartoon, but I don't remember really latching onto it at all.
Yeah.
For me, a few years after that, I was watching. So for any British millennials, remember Fox Kids was one of the Sky TV bundle kid shows. You had like your Cartoon Network, Nickelodeon, Fox Kids were like your main ones. Fox Kids had a live action TV show.
Yeah.
So it was the same style as the films, which I think were late 80s, early 90s.
Yeah.
So it was that style, but a bit more cost friendly. Like they'd obviously made improvements in the big prosthetic costumes and moving mouths and everything.
The sets were a bit simplified, weren't they?
Yeah. It was very of the time. It was very Power Rangers.
Yeah.
I think they used a lot of the same like enemy, bad guy monsters, like styles and puppets and whatever. But it was that kind of style, to the point where I was reminded of this by a meme, and it was a meme using a picture from the Power Rangers TMNT crossover.
No
so
shit.
That time they had like some crossover episodes. Don't know which show it was on, but they definitely happened. And the reason I know they happened was someone took a picture of that and captioned it as a meme of when you're out with your crew high as fuck and you run into another separate crew that's also high as fuck. And it was the Power Rangers and the Turtles being like, hey, you guys, like, you guys. Like, and I saw that and had this like intense flashback of like, oh my God, there was a crossover episode.
I didn't know that.
Yeah.
Dude, can we just stop recording now and just get high and watch that? That sounds great.
I think just get high and look at the meme and just stare at the meme and laugh at it for like an hour.
For reference, just for professional reasons, I do not take any drugs.
Yeah, of course. I don't do any drugs.
Never have done. Never will do.
Not even paracetamol. Not even. I mean, food technically is a chemical, so I.
Everything is chemicals, Ryan.
Yeah, when people say that I don't do drugs, it's like you're drinking alcohol. It's like, well, that doesn't count. It's like, look, all right, culturally, yes, I see what you mean. I'm going off on
omega-3 fatty acids are chemicals.
Exactly. I take Flintstones vitamins. That's the only drugs I do.
Bassett's soft and chewy vitamins.
Exactly.
For me and you.
Fisherman's friend.
Have you ever had a fisherman's friend?
I think I have. I don't remember well, but I think I have.
If you'd had a fisherman's friend, you'd remember it.
Yeah, I remember it was minty, isn't it? It's overly minty. It's more minty than mint, isn't it?
No, it's not minty. It's like heavily mentholated, like the same kind of flavor.
Yeah.
But almost more like what's the flavor that absinthe is? Also,
Cough syrup. Menthol, I think, or cough syrup. Or
no, it's a very specific
licorice.
thing. Yeah, like a very licoricey.
Okay.
Awful stuff.
Yeah, it's not great. So I was watching the live action TMNT show, and really into that as a kid. There was one of those like, oh, it's on when you get home from school kind of things, which is cool. Had their own little plot. I say their own little plot. It was a plot within that where there was a fifth turtle, turned out to be their sister. So it was like a new one introduced.
I remember her. Yeah, I do. I remember this show. Yeah.
And she was like raised by like actual ninjas or samurai or something. So she was like properly like disciplined in martial arts and everything, and like yin and yang tai chi. Very stereotypical like
Asian.
Yeah, exactly. Very like just blanket like all the stereotypes related to martial arts. She was that. So that I enjoyed. There was a cartoon after that, which I think was on maybe Fox as well, which was a bit more stylized a bit more like late 90s style.
That might have even been the one that I consumed,
Maybe early 10s, maybe. Well, no, probably in the noughties. There was one that I watched only more recently than you'd think. To the point where I won't say exactly, because at any point I would say it's embarrassing for how old I was watching this TV show, but also, fuck it. Adults watching kids shows, if they're good, fucking normalize it. Like, who gives a shit?
Is this something that you watched when you had a few vitamins?
No, not even. I was literally like tuning in because I was like, this is a good show. I'd heard it was a good show. Yeah. It was a Nickelodeon show because they own the rights now.
Yeah.
Or at least own like the publishing rights of visual stuff. But it was a kind of computer CGI cartoon, so it was like made in that style.
Was that good? I did hear about that.
The story I literally heard from people, like from Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles fans who watched it young and it just kept into it, becoming adults. They were like, this show, it looks a very kid show, but it's really good.
Cool.
And I watched it, and it was like generally like good story arcs that went across entire seasons, and still had it like theme of the week kind of episodes, but like actually felt like it was building up to like a bigger thing. And
I mean, I feel the same way about the Star Wars Clone Wars stuff. Like,
yeah, I would generally similar to that. I would say in terms of like story quality. So
cool.
That was kind of my.
I'll watch it.
Yeah,
that sounds great.
I also saw the films where they were like massive mutants. You know, that recent one.
Wasn't Shia LaBeouf in that?
No, that's you think of Transformers,
right?
Similar kind of style. This one it had bloody Megan Fox in it. She was like April O'Neil, and everyone's like, "Boo! She's not my."
That's why I thought Shia LaBeouf was there.
Yeah,
because she's also in the Transformers films, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I think might have been Michael Bay as well, potentially, or he was producing or something. He bloody produces everything.
So he was involved too. I heard really bad things.
Yeah, it wasn't great. It was it's just a lot of spectacle and not very fun.
Because to be honest with you, if we are owed a good Turtles film.
Well, hopefully we're getting one soon, which may or may not be why we're doing this episode now. But
that's why we're doing this.
There is one coming out soon.
Sneaky bastards.
There's one coming out the week that this will be released. Hopefully.
Right. Okay. Can we go see it together?
Yeah, of course. Yeah.
I like that we're just casually making social plans on the podcast now.
I mean, but they're not social plans; they're work plans now.
Yeah, I suppose this is.
We can write off our tax.
It's a business expense.
We had to go see the film to tell the listeners a few weeks after it's released whether it's any good or not, what we liked it. So there's a film coming out which looks good, made by Seth Rogen and Evan Goldberg. So I think they're making it, or at the very least producing it.
Have we had a conversation about this?
I think I've told you, like, hey, we're doing a TMNT episode because there's a film coming out. We'll watch the trailer after this episode.
I must have just heard TMNT and gone, cool. Like, I like Turtles. This is going to be fun. And just blanked the reason we were doing it.
Yeah, we'll watch the trailer after this and you can get hyped for it.
I remember that you said Zestful once 6 months ago, and yet I forget I didn't know that there was a TMNT film coming out.
I mean, it's different priorities.
Oh, my brain, mate. It just doesn't function sometimes.
I think you can be forgiven for forgetting that a new Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles film is coming out. Like, it's not really like important information. I know
well, it is if you're a big TMNT fan.
I know because I do the research for this, and that was the main reason. But so going into the comics, which is specifically also the games, I played very recently Shredder's Revenge. Great game.
I heard good things.
It's classic throwback scroller beat 'em up. But you
Yeah.
can get up to like 6 players. So you get the 4 Turtles plus like Splinter and April and who have you. Very fun. Just like mash the buttons, beat the ninjas, move around, do your special attacks and all that kind of stuff. So, and I played one years and years ago. One of the first games I played was a TMNT game. But you know when you're a kid and you're first playing games and you don't even kind of make the connection because they look so different.
Yeah.
Like the graphics were the graphics. So
what was your first game console? What was it on?
Nintendo 64, I think.
You had an N64?
Yeah, I think so, yeah.
I had a Mega Drive.
I had the one...
For our American listeners, that's a Sega Genesis in Europe.
I'm pretty sure the Nintendo 64 that had, if this helps anyone narrow it down, it was the one with Duck Hunt with the gun that you plugged in as the controller.
That's not an N64. That's a SNES.
Might have been a SNES then. I might have had one or the other.
If it was an N64, you'd know because it would have that weird 3-pointed controller. And then a NES has a little square controller, and a SNES.
It's SNES then. Yeah, no, it was a SNES.
The SNES has the slightly rounded NES controller.
Yeah, I think I had the N64 afterwards. But so
you had a SNES.
So the SNES had the original. SNES had the original Mario game on it, didn't it? I think.
No, that was the NES.
Well, it might have been the NES then. Unless they carried it forward.
So Mario Brothers was on NES, and then Super Mario Brothers was on SNES because it was the Super.
Wow, you know more than me, to be fair. I had the one, I'm pretty sure it was the original one, because I remember that first level was like iconic. Like, I mean, everyone knows the Mario theme, but the real test is when you go down the tunnel that's near the Who would have thought this one would have been the musical episode? of all the things.
We just break into Mario. As if you, because like, I had a second-hand Sega Mega Drive, which actually is in the table that we are currently recording in.
Right.
Because I still have my Mega Drive, it still works. And I remember going to friends' houses and thinking they were really bougie because they had a SNES.
Right.
Oh my god, is that a fucking Super Nintendo? Is that they can play fucking Mario on that? Fucking hell. Because I was just like, I mean, in fairness, I had Streets of Rage, which is infinitely better than anything. I feel like Streets of Rage might have come out on the SNES though.
It might. I didn't play that, so I don't know. And to be honest,
you never played Streets of Rage?
I probably have, and that sounds like a weird cop-out answer. I'm pretty sure I have, but I don't know for sure.
I have a Mega Drive and 2 controllers. You're gonna have to just sit here and drink beer with me one night and play. It's so good.
It's way cheaper than going outdoors nowadays, isn't it?
Well, absolutely. Oh yeah, the old cosy lives in this economy.
No, we'll do that for sure. What was I going to say? Another quick video game. My video game like knowledge, you know, like cause I was playing when I was younger, but I just didn't know. I didn't know what I was playing on or what game I was playing or whatever. But then my kind of memory, my mind started to click in when I started playing the PlayStation 1. So that was when I was like picking my own games and, you know, experiencing it that way.
Because when we met, we both had PS2s.
Yeah.
And we were all rampant Grand Theft Auto fans.
Oh, yeah. San Andreas swept like our school. Like everyone who was cool was playing it.
Yeah.
But to the point where the day it came out, because everyone had slowly, like at points, played 3 and Vice City.
Yeah.
Not necessarily when they came out, but people the word had spread over the time between releases. So by the time San Andreas came out, everyone had played those. So when San Andreas came out, everyone got that on release. Like in our
didn't.
School. Oh, me and some friends literally were like meeting like first thing in school to talk about the levels we had played. And I was ahead of one of my friends, like by a couple of levels. So when he was like, "Oh, I got to this," I was like, "Oh, I'm on this now." And they're like, "Oh, fuck's sake!" And then one day they were off sick, and then they came and they massively got ahead of me. I was like, "You bastard! You cheated!
You took a day off school." No, I had to wait until either my birthday or Christmas to come round. And to be honest with you, I kind of knew my parents wouldn't be super thrilled with me getting that game anyway.
Same, yeah.
And so somebody had bought it for me and it was wrapped up waiting to be given to me. And I was like, if I just keep my fucking mouth shut, I'm actually going to get... Because we were like 12.
I went to a DVD rental shop nearby that's long closed, but they used to just give any kid anything. It was like ridiculous. So I was like picking up like 18 games and just like putting on the counter. Like, try my luck. Worst case, I'll be like, oh shit, is that 18? Oh, I didn't realize.
And that Grand Theft Auto was an 18.
And they just gave it to me. And I was like, right, leave before saying anything. Took it home. My parents were like, where'd you get this? So I was like, oh, I got my ways. And they were like, that's not an acceptable answer.
Yeah, so I had to wait, and I remember being rampantly jealous of all of you talking about San Andreas while I was still like, I'm just playing a bit of Vice City.
Yeah, that's when you have to be like contrarian, like, I don't even like GTA.
Yeah,
have fun with your loser game.
Yeah, I just really want to play some Ratchet and Clank.
Yeah, the real gamers. The true gamers.
In fairness, I really liked Ratchet and Clank.
I've heard good things. I haven't played it myself. But...
Never played Ratchet and Clank?
No, but it looks good.
Too busy killing prostitutes, weren't you?
And playing GTA. You set me up for that one. It's an obvious joke. Yeah.
Just a disclaimer for any
we
vulnerable
do not
listeners.
condone at all harm to sex workers.
Absolutely. Pay them promptly.
I mean, especially that.
Treat them kindly and pay them promptly.
Treat them like human beings. Sex work is work.
Work is work.
That's the one.
That's the one.
Yeah.
Sex positive. We are sex positive on the Comic Literate podcast. Not that it should ever come up.
I mean, eventually we'll do like a bloody adult title and there'll be like graphic sex scenes for no reason. So we'll get into it then probably. Probably be like a Garth Ennis title at some point.
Oh, yeah, that guy.
Yeah.
We've talked about this, haven't we?
I just saw he's doing the new... He's doing or he's done... Or he's actively doing Peacemaker. So he actually came back to like superhero comics to do Peacemaker.
Really?
Yeah.
After making all that porn?
And violence. Don't forget the violence. So yeah, we'll definitely be doing that at some point. And
we've done it again, Ryan.
Speaking of comics, that's why I'm bringing it around.
Hey, well done.
So just before we get into the comics, I've got one little fun thing to do first.
Yeah, okay.
So I recently, completely independent of this episode, I watched a animation of a comic title. There's animation of TMNT meets Batman. So
oh, wow. Is that a thing?
Yeah, they did a comic crossover, which apparently is very good. I just watched the animated like movie of it.
Did the Turtles kick Batman's ass?
No, they team up. Like they have a bit of a back and forth. They do a thing. It's a thing on another podcast that put it well for me, which was they fight a bit and then they're mates. Like that is the classic superhero crossover thing. So what I'm gonna do is I've got one question for you, multiple choice.
Yeah.
And just whatever best answer you can give. So in this TMNT meets Batman crossover animation, I didn't check if it was in the comics, so I'm just going to specifically say it was in the animated movie. Yeah. Which of these phrases does Batman not say?
Okay, go for it.
Of the three, he only didn't say one.
Yeah, I need to pick which one he didn't say. Yeah. Cool.
So the options are Cowabunga, Turtle Power, or Pizza Time.
Oh, that's tough.
Yeah. I watched it and then thought about it afterwards in preparing this episode. And I thought...
And you were like, fuck, you said two of them.
I said, that'll be a fun quiz.
I think... So Batman would have enough whimsy to say Cowabunga.
Does he?
Well, no, he doesn't.
He's not known for his whimsy.
I think it's Pizza Time is the one he didn't say.
Is that your final answer?
It is, yeah. Which one did... Oh, please tell me you said Cowabunga.
He does say Cowabunga. It was Turtle Power he didn't say. So Cowabunga, the way he says it is he's in a final fight. So it's the reason that Cowabunga. Not even like that. It more of just like a Cowabunga. Like a little bit.
Who was voicing Batman?
I don't know. I think an actor, but not an overly famous one.
Yeah, okay.
Definitely, it wasn't Conroy. This was after his passing, unfortunately. But it was kind of more Keaton-esque, like that level of like not quite rough voice, but normal voice, but still a bit dark and bassy.
Yeah.
So he's in a final fight with Shredder because what happens is Shredder has teamed up with Ra's al Ghul. So they're like swapping stuff like you do this for me and I'll do this for you and we'll both like rule our respective New York and Gotham or whatever. So the Turtles are fighting Ra's and Batman's fighting Shredder. He fought him earlier and Shredder fucked him up with like this like weird chai, like focusing his chi into like a thing that almost like broke Batman kind of thing. So Batman, he's like mid-fight him again. And it's a really good fight action scene for an animation. And Shredder's got him on the back foot again, and he's doing the thing again. And he's like, any last words? And Batman's like, yeah, Cowabunga. And Shredder's like, what? What are you saying that for? And then Raphael comes from the side, swinging on a rope, just kicks him in the face. He's like, whee!
Oh, good.
And then the other one, right at the end, the Turtle's like, right, we got to go to New York. It's been fun teaming up with you. If you need us again, give us a shout, and
Yeah.
hopefully we'll see you again, whatever. And then turn around, about to leave. Batman like puts a hand on the shoulder. He's like, "You can't leave yet. It's pizza time." He's like, ordered pizzas.
Oh, Batman gives them pizza. That's so good.
Damian Wayne is like, "We never get pizza till you guys go, so I like you guys now."
That's so good.
So, quick
Who's your favourite turtle?
Donatello, easily.
Really?
Yeah, that's something. So, speaking of a larger franchise, I was going to make this point as well. So, secondly, obviously, who is your favourite?
I like
turtle?
Raph.
No, I see him more as maybe a bit more of a Michelangelo.
I mean, my character is definitely more Michelangelo, isn't it? But I like Raphael. He's the quippiest.
I mean, they're all quite. I mean, Mikey's the quippiest.
Yeah,
Raph's got some quips, but normally like very tough guy.
Michelangelo's my favourite. I like Mikey. Yeah, you're absolutely fucking right.
To change your
you're absolutely right, because Mikey's the quippiest, and that's my favourite thing about the Turtles.
Yeah. I think that, all the like personality tests and what's the one with the 4 letters?
The Myers-Briggs.
Yeah, that one. Yeah.
Which turtle are you? Is
the most accurate? Fuck these personality tests. Fuck Harry Potter house and all that bollocks. Who's your favorite turtle? That's the personality decision.
I think we need to just, for posterity, at this point in the podcast, lock down what is your Myers-Briggs and what is your Harry Potter house.
Do you pick a Myers-Briggs or do you have to take the test for it?
You have to take the test, you idiot.
Well, yeah, then
Have you never done a Myers-Briggs?
No.
You hopped out of education quite young, didn't you?
Oh, so there was a trend that came out just after.
They make you do it at university. They make you do it quite a few times at university.
Considering it's been widely panned in like the actual like circles, the actual like psychology circles are like, yeah, this is bollocks.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, it's a thing. God. So I'm an ENTP.
Right.
And I'm an ENTP. I've been an ENTP every time I've taken the test since I was like 18. I've never gotten anything else. I'm always an ENTP. What Harry Potter house are you? You must have done one of those online tests.
I've not done any tests. I am inclined to most probably say Ravenclaw.
Do you know what? I am a Ravenclaw.
Really?
Because I did. Yeah, somebody made me somebody sat me down in front of the online test and made me do that. It was when the Pottermore came out.
Yeah, the problem with those tests, the online ones, like, there needs to be some kind of like, this is the definitive test. And the reason it's the definitive test is because the answers don't correlate to each house. Like the 4, it's like, you are walking through the woods and you suddenly see an animal. Is it a griffin, a lion, or a raven, or a whatever Hufflepuff is, or a snake? And you pick snake, he goes, ooh, bad choice.
Like, are you brave or are you smart? I got Ravenclaw.
Are you brave? Are you smart? Are you kind or evil?
Yeah, absolutely.
Which are you?
Evil, motherfucker.
I think I'm evil. And then there's the Harry Potter nerd that's like, actually Slytherin, it doesn't actually mean evil. It means whatever Snape was.
You nearly put your glasses up to your face as you said that. Yeah, and I was like, that's exactly that's the gesture.
I was already doing the voice, so I was like,
actually, I think you'll find.
Actually.
So yeah, I'm an ENTP who got Ravenclaw, and I like Michelangelo.
Yeah, the Michelangelo is the most important one.
Donatello makes a lot of sense for you.
Yeah, I was like, as a kid, I was always very into science, as you know, that's how we met, and technology and stuff. So the turtle that was like the science one, the smart one, I was like, that's the best one.
Because Raphael's the most hardcore fighter, isn't he?
He's a hot head, so it depends. Yeah. It depends what you mean by hardcore fighter. Like, he goes hard, but the problem is he's too undisciplined.
Yeah, absolutely. Which is why he only gets a fucking sigh.
Well, that's another thing. You brought this up when we were talking about this previously.
All of the turtles get the weapon that they needed.
Do you want to explain them, or?
Yeah, so Michelangelo uses
nunchucks,
and that's because we've talked about this, haven't we?
It's because apparently they are one of the most difficult weapons to master, so they're one of the most difficult disciplines. So with Mikey being a bit of a screw around and like short attention span and stuff, Splinter was like, I'm giving you the hardest to master because you need that extra focus. So if you do this, you'll have the tools to be a better ninja.
And then Raphael was the most hot-headed.
Yes.
So he got Sai. Sai are essentially 2 blunt daggers with big guards.
Yeah.
But they're entirely a defensive weapon. And so their entire use, you'd either have 2 of them or you'd have one of them with a blade. And you'd use it to catch and trap a sword.
Yeah.
And so the hottest head
needs to wait for the first attack and counter it rather than going in.
And then
first.
Donatello relies on science and technology, and so he just got given a literal stick.
With the lesson being, you need to rely on yourself and your skills, so I'm giving you the most basic weapon. So it's all on you. Like
I've forgotten the fourth turtle.
Leo's being the swords, he is the leader. Katanas, essentially. Because he's the leader and he has to make like the most decisions. He's got the deadliest weapons because he has the brunt of using them, not safely, but like non-lethally restraining himself. He has to think about his decisions.
He's the only one that he trusted not to behead somebody in the sewers.
Yeah.
Realistically. And so he gave him 2 swords.
Yeah, exactly. And I tell you what.
Don't think they're katanas, though. I think they're probably wakasashis.
I mean, obviously you're more of an expert than I am for knowing that word, so I'll take your word on it.
So a katana's a full-size sword.
Right.
Wakasashi's half-size. And then a tanto's a dagger. I reckon they're wakasashis.
I'm going to adamantly agree with you on the basis that I know it's the always sunny course. I don't know enough about the subject to dispute him, so I'm just going to believe him.
If you are like a raging Turtles nerd, comicglitter@gmail.com. If we get anything wrong, let me know.
Oh, 100%.
Because again, like I've always kind of thought the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles are really cool.
Yep.
Like the idea that there's actually some serious stuff in the franchise, but it's a bit of a laugh, isn't it? It's like 1980s silliness. Here's 4 turtles that are the best ninjas in the world. Go.
Yeah. And I think that really speaks through the different mediums. I think the reason that it's been translated across so many times is because you can change everything else. You can change the tone, the style, the medium, everything. But what they always retain is the core story, setting, and characters.
Yeah.
So the fact that, I mean, how many other franchises just have that, where they essentially just reboot the same story over and over again? But people like it because it's such a unique story in itself. Like, there's nothing close to it,
and it always
really
looks so different. I mean, to actually get into the comics, one of the things that I found really charming about both is that the Turtles kind of look badass in both.
Yes, and I think that is specific choices to distinguish the comics from everything else that's kid friendly, the TV shows and the movies and such.
Because again, you know, the original comic, by virtue of it being on really pulpy paper and being completely black and white and being a bit crude,
definitely violent, yeah.
I mean, it was definitely at the more obscure end of that market, wasn't it?
When it first came out, for sure, yes.
1984. This would have been competing with stuff that looked like that Alan Moore Superman run.
Little after, I think that was...
Same, you know, we're talking same period, though.
Yeah.
This would have been competing with really glossy, well-printed comics.
Yeah.
And the art here is crude.
Yeah.
I'll tell you
what's a good comparison for anyone at home who wants to see inspiration. So, doing my research, I saw... So, the creators of the series, which are... Kevin Eastman and Peter Laird. So I've heard them abbreviate to Eastman and Laird as like the Turtles guys, the guys who created them in the first place. They apparently were very influenced by pulpy comic books at the time, because 80s was when they started going a bit like they started veering towards like the radical of the 90s. So they were experimenting with like different stuff. Frank Miller was doing Daredevil at the time, and that apparently was the art and writing style that inspired them specifically.
Okay.
To the point where, do you know the Turtles' origin story? I mean, you read it in the comic. That origin is actually meant to be tie-in with another existing superhero's origin, which is Daredevil. So Daredevil's origin... It's a very clear. It's kind of parody, kind of homage, like, because they were genuinely big fans of Frank Miller's Daredevil run at the time. And if you look at
super fucking cool, right?
If you look at Frank Miller's work at the time, his, albeit being in color, but you can see in the line style, it's like the proportion style of humans specifically. If you look at the humans in the original Turtles, they look very similar to that kind of what he was doing then, because Frank Miller was writing and drawing. So the origin, Daredevil, there's a blind man crossing the road, truck coming with all the barrels of whatever the chemical is on the back.
Yeah.
Kid pushes the blind man out of the way just in time, but the truck still veers and crashes. The whatever it is, spills into the kid's eyes. and he blinds him, but he becomes Daredevil. So he gets all the echolocation powers and everything. Very oversimplified way of saying that.
Yeah, I mean,
The Turtles' origin is that truck, so all that same stuff, but the stuff from the truck, the chemical, spilled into the sewer where it infected a rat and 4 turtles. And they, And that was a direct, this is the same thing. Like if you ask, anyone a Daredevil, they'll be like, oh, that's a cute thing. If you ask Eastman and Laird, it's like, yep, that's the exact same scenario in Marvel. It's cross company. They can't say no because we're established now. So we're too famous and it counts.
Super cool. I didn't know that.
Yeah, no, very cool.
I mean, again, the origin story is super familiar, isn't it? The Turtles' origin story is very familiar superhero shenanigans, isn't it?
Yes.
It's superhero shenanigans is what it is.
Very intentionally.
Yeah, absolutely. But I didn't... Yeah, I mean, again, not knowing much about Daredevil, the idea of something corrupting a very normal person or animal and turning them into something super, that's really familiar to anybody that consumes any kind of comic books, not even superhero ones. But to realise that it was such a close homage of something so specific, that's really dope. I personally, actually... I'm probably going to keep reading.
Really? That's interesting.
I like the way the turtles are drawn.
They look really mean and different, don't they?
They look mean is the right word. They look mean. They're not as quippy. No,
and I think so. The dialogue is one thing that reading it, the dialogue shouted out to me a bit as not as good as what I'm used to, but I'm very hyper aware of the fact that the comics we get nowadays, modern comics, varies. Some are still like this today, but we get some really good, realistic dialogue in comics as well, which we've covered episodes on. So, but when it's such an old title, I can look back at it and go, it was parodying superhero comics of the time, and that's how they were written. So it was obviously copying a style. And also felt it was a bit comic book superhero of the 80s, also a bit noir, Western samurai film,
it? Yeah, absolutely.
Where they're talking to themselves constantly, and it's all very, for our time now, very stilted dialogue. But again, it was parodying what was happening at the time.
I liked it.
Yeah, no, it was good. I liked the tone of it being very dark and out of the shadows, and they felt much more like ninjas in this one than in this one and the modern one we're about to talk about.
And this is the thing, isn't it? Because I started reading The Last Ronin before I read any of the original stuff, and I was like, wow, they've done such a great job of making this funny camp comic book series really gritty and kind of dark. And then I started reading the original, and I was like, oh no shit, that was there from the start. It's just the cartoons that got a bit silly.
Yeah, it definitely was meant to start as just a pulpy, violent comic for adults or young adults, teenagers. And then, obviously, as soon as there was a merchandising option, film rights, it was we can tone this down. We can make it kid-friendly.
We can put them in a suit. We can put people in suits, basically.
And there's something I'm trying to find here, because I saw it earlier and I did not make a note of it for some dumb reason. I found it now. The reason that they are the 4 specific things of Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles was they, apart from even the Turtles, actually, they're all references to, tropes at the time, the 80s. So the teenagers, that was a very popular thing of making teenagers superheroes to appeal to the youngest. Because by the 80s, you had the adults who had started reading in the 60s and 70s. Yeah. They're trying to appeal. That was a big thing of why Robin's been around so long. It's appeal to the kids. Yeah. So that was referenced to the Teen Titans, who were popular at the time. The Mutants was referenced to obviously the X-Men, who were very popular in the 80s. The Ninjas as referencing here, Daredevil was one of those ones. He was doing a lot of ninja stuff at the time.
And kind of Batman in some respects.
Yeah. And then the last reference, this is from Wikipedia, great source of information. I don't know where they source this, but apparently the animal part, the turtles, being referenced to funny animals such as Howard the Duck. I didn't know that was a big trope that needed parodying, but apparently it was.
Well, I suppose, if you're appealing to teenagers, by this point in the 1980s, those teenagers would have been exposed to
all of those things.
Looney Tunes, anthropomorphized animal cartoons. This is a kind of grittier extension of the kind of Saturday morning cartoons these kids would have been consuming in America.
And that is a trope that keeps coming back, is whatever is considered for children at the time, let's make a gritty adult version of it. Yeah. And it's weird to think that Turtles based on that, and then went back to kids,
Yeah.
and then has flip-flopped back and forth just for whatever medium they want to appeal to.
I suppose the interesting thing about the Turtles is they've not always occupied the same place in culture, but they have had a place in our culture
Oh, for sure, yeah.
for 40 years now.
And
nearly.
they are one of those things that, because of the films and the television shows, everyone knows about them.
Yeah.
Hardly anyone knows they come from comics originally, but again, the personality test. You can ask a lot of people who their favorite turtle is, and people who have not even really consumed any bit of medium will have an answer.
Yeah.
Everyone knows who, I say everyone, a lot of people know of this day and age when like everyone's got their micro niche interests and everything. The fact that a lot of people know the leader, the hothead, the science smart one, and the funny slacker one. Like everyone knows those tropes without even having read any of it.
I can't decide if I like Raph or if I like Raph or Mikey best. I like Raph and Mikey.
You're gonna have to
a
do
lot.
some really deep introspective, like, which am I?
Well, I suppose, and this is one of the really interesting things about this comic is that we only get to really see one turtle for a lot of it.
Well, that's the set. So should we start on the first original one and talk a bit about that first? The original.
Oh no, I feel like we're just having a free-form conversation here. It's jazz, baby. I know you've got specific notes of specific things you want to say.
Okay.
And you're just going to have to weave them into the conversation because
Well,
I'm feeling jazzy.
Yeah, to be fair, I've made notes about like specific things happening in the comics, and
Yeah.
I've since kind of thought these are such small parts of the overall franchise that it's not worth mentioning them. So
Yeah.
I want to try and talk more like general like tones and vibes and
let's
stuff.
chat about the Last Ronin
So
for a bit.
before we get into it, I will say,
Okay.
if I'll just say for the listener, if you're considering checking out The Last Ronin, I would say if you're interested at all in TMNT, it's a great title to
Just read it.
read like a different take on it. I
5
should
issues,
say.
read it.
Oh yeah,
Do you know what I mean?
and might be continuing as well potentially.
Oh,
so.
really?
Yeah. So
Dope.
I won't say anymore about both that. But yeah, if you want to read it because we're about to go into it. Stop here if you haven't. Come back or just play us on mute just so we get the extra listens.
Yeah.
Anyway, go on.
But you only see one turtle.
Yes, that is the last Ronin of the title.
Yeah. And how did you feel about that whole thing?
I think,
And which turtle it ended up being?
yeah, I think the fact that they kept back which turtle it was a good device in itself. Unfortunately, when I was looking for blurbs to put on this, after I'd read it, luckily, there were blurbs that just had it in who it was. So I was like, save that. Like, if you're advertising, like, read this comic, save that, because it's literally written into the comic as a issue 1 and, like, reveal.
Yeah.
So leave that. But there's, like, blurbs, like, oh, like, how's Michelangelo going to be in the last one? I thought that was a good choice of the last one, because
Yeah, me too.
he feels like the one who needed the character arc from a tragedy.
Yeah, it would have been a bit boring if it was Leonardo.
Yeah.
That would have been too obvious. I think Donatello would have been too Batman.
I think Donatello's personality and arc, he's less based on him making it on his own, because he does a lot of stuff on his own with all the tech and everything.
And I think if you'd made it Donatello, you would have had to have had a really good reason for him not having a bunch of sick tech.
Yeah, I mean, he would have undoubtedly. He would have been Batman for sure.
Yeah, and this is it. And then Raph would have been too violent.
Raph, I think, would be my number 2 pick.
Yeah, maybe actually. Yeah,
I think that the story you could have done with him not being out for revenge immediately, going through a depression, I think that would have been as interesting potentially as Michelangelo.
Yeah.
So those are the 2 I think you could have done on, and they picked Mikey, and that's as good a choice because he had to grow up in the immediate aftermath of this tragedy. And
yeah,
everything.
absolutely.
What do you think of the art style of Last Ronin?
I mean, again, I've been pleasantly surprised because again, I'd not really read that much Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle in terms of comics, and so I was going into it expecting it to look like the cartoons, and I thought both of them looked sick.
The one thing that's interesting is the art apparently is done mostly by. So for most of the Turtles run, it's done by Eastman and Laird.
Yeah,
and that's interesting in itself. 2 people both writing and doing the art.
Is that the original?
This is the original specifically. And what I noticed in the original, which I was going to mention before, when you'd only read the 1 issue, I said you need to read at least the 2nd issue to get a better feel of it. And the reason being is because the art changes a bit jarringly from page to page,
doesn't it?
And I think that is them doing different.
Yeah,
and they're both equally. they're both good in different ways. So one is a bit more basic, a bit more intentionally like bare bones. So there's like no background sometimes, or the background's just a wall and it's like outlines of the characters. And then the other one, and we have no, unless I proper look into it, that we don't know who did who.
Yeah.
But the other one was like shading and lines and like way more detail. So it was kind of jarring to go from like basic outlines, like black and white, like very more like comparatively like Kirkman's Walking Dead.
Do you know what?
That simple white, black and white outlines.
There was two things that came to mind when I was reading it. And the first one was Mouse.
Yeah. And then whoever the second artist is does the proper shading of like, kind of remind me of like Todd McFarlane's Spawn, which is like loads of line, loads of color. That was in color, so this is more the black and white version. But and it kind of reminded like newspaper shorts or cartoons. Yeah. But both those different styles.
Well, that's what it made. It made me think of pulp.
Yes,
it's so pulpy, isn't it?
Yeah, it's violent, and that's one thing that made me think. The thing about the common theory about the weapons and why each still has the weapons.
Yeah,
I think that was if that's a part of the official franchise, that was brought in way later.
Yeah, absolutely.
Because Raph is stabbing people with the scythe, Leo's stabbing people with the fucking whatever, the swords.
Yeah,
like there's no like. Ooh, it's actually interesting because like that was retcon later for sure.
Yeah, 100%. Like Donatello was braining people with that staff, isn't he?
And quite smartly though.
Yeah,
I think the reason that was brought in then for the black and white, it was because they needed the different weapons to discern the characters because they did all look the same.
Yeah, they did, didn't they?
And it wasn't until they obviously changed the color that they brought in the colored headbands. Yeah.
Yeah, no, and it makes sense that they'd all be armed differently because it means that you've got 4 completely different visual sets of action things that they can be doing.
Yeah.
And they pick interesting looking Japanese and Okinawan martial arts weapons. This is a particular point of interest for me.
Yeah.
This is something that I know I'm relatively knowledgeable on. You know, the other weapons that kind of come in that set have had a scythe. But again, kind of too similar to a sword, a bit unwieldy, wouldn't have looked great. And so, sai, nunchucks, staff, and either katanas or wakasashis, we're just going to say katanas for convenience here.
Ones that they can carry on their backs specifically. Like
Absolutely. And they look good, don't they?
Yeah.
They make that, and they make for 4 distinct silhouettes as well.
Yeah.
Which is interesting.
I think what's good about this as well is the turtles look so mean and almost like typical bad guys of the era, like they're just drawn mean looking, and I think that's why they had to go with such a family based like origin, or like not origin, but like they go out and do this violence, but then you see them go home to their adopted dad, who
very Dominic Toretto, isn't it?
A little bit family. But this is like that archetype, like training, like being adopted by and trained by in martial arts. Like I assume that was a big trope pre-Turtles, but this really brought it into the mainstream, I think, a lot more. Like when you think of like being adopted by and trained by, like obviously there's superhero versions like Iron Fist and Shang-Chi and ones like that. But this was like the very like, I will raise you as my own and teach you the ways of my people. Like
Absolutely,
it was that kind of, which I think was like in pulpy samurai films probably beforehand as well.
Yeah, I mean, look at the Karate Kid.
Yeah, exactly. Like that was probably the similar time, wasn't it?
Yeah, mid-1980s. Yeah, fuck yeah.
80s were big onto like martial arts, weren't they? For this exact reason.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think in the 80s, Japanese and Chinese cinema hit the US in a pretty meaningful way, didn't it?
Yeah, for sure.
So people started imbibing. I
think it actually it first crossed platform, crossed genres, I think. And I do not know enough about this to say for sure. It's just a theory based on what little information I have. I think it was the blaxploitation films where you had these black characters who were like normally like ridding their community of crime or something like that.
Yeah.
There's a great joke at Black Dynamite, which I'm not even sure if it's a parody or if it was a real one, but it was at the time. But it was this guy, Black Dynamite, was like, I'm getting rid of all the drug dealers in the community. And the person he's talking is like, but Black Dynamite, I'm a drug dealer. It's just though there were a lot of those characters who were like just like black people in black communities, and they knew martial arts.
Yeah.
So I think I suspect I've got a theory that that's where like crossed into like.
And Bruce Lee was floating about.
Oh, he was
in the
mega
60s,
popular, yeah.
wasn't he?
I think maybe even late 70s. Oh no, late 60s. Yeah.
Yeah, late 1960s. Bruce Lee came to Hollywood.
When the 80s, I'm guessing that would have been Jackie Chan films. Who was inspired heavily by Bruce Lee.
Bruce Lee, yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so Bruce Lee films and Jackie Chan films were huge in the 80s, weren't they? Like even though a lot of those Bruce Lee films were a bit older.
Yeah.
I think the VHS was a thing in the 1980s, wasn't it?
Late 80s, I'm going to say. Whenever I'm unsure, I just go early or late.
Yeah.
And it feels more like a late 80s thing.
Yeah, no, in
Betamax as well.
fairness, I'm not 100% sure that home cinema would have been a big deal, but those old Bruce Lee films would have been like syndicated on TV and stuff, wouldn't they?
And I feel like the blaxploitation films probably saw like enjoyed the martial arts in those films, so like let's just do it in our films. Like that was just a natural like take what you like and use it in your stuff.
Yeah, it's interesting, isn't it? That kind of because there'd been a lot of general phobia of anything Asian in America for a long time leading up to the 1980s because of the Vietnam and Korean wars.
For sure, yeah.
And so, you know, there's a lot of stories of like Asian American families suffering a lot of racism and there being a general phobia of anything and of Asian.
Yeah.
And so it wasn't until the 1980s really that America was able to embrace things like that, and then you see this wealth of media that kind of has like, you know,
like you said, the actual physical tapes being like transported and traded, so you didn't have to go to a cinema. You could literally go around someone's house and be like, oh, check out this tape I got. And it was martial arts. And I think the appeal of martial arts just generally was like most fighting like beforehand was like fake looking punches with the sound of like a, you know, bat hitting meat kind of, you know, that kind of stuff. And with the martial arts, same sound effects, but you had like these intricate, fast movements. Then people were like, Jesus Christ, what is this? And it made fighting look like art. Martial arts.
Absolutely, yeah. No, yeah, completely agree. And then it wasn't long before this was going to be translated into comic books. It's just funny that they did it with 4 Turtles.
I think, like they said, it was being popular in Daredevil first.
Yeah.
Like, and not first, but before. So I think it was already popular in comics. Yeah. And then Eastman and Laird were like, ninjas is quite a popular thing. Like, could we make the Teenage Turtles ninjas? Like, and I think that they just took all these points and they were like, this is a fun amalgamation and it's cool. And the title was like, we know, having done all these episodes, that the title of an episode will draw people in. So when it's just Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles, back then, you'd been like, what is this?
What the fuck is that?
And I think that's a trope in itself now, is like crazy title just to try and get eyes on it. I think that was probably pioneered in a way.
Do you know where the concept of the ninja comes from?
I mean, ninjutsu, but that's like about as far as it goes for me.
It's absolute. Ninjutsu was invented in the 20th century. So the concept of the ninja comes from
the theater,
kabuki theater.
That's it. Yeah, I did. Oh, yeah, I this. Yeah,
the stage hands would wear all black, and you were supposed to ignore them. And then there was a famous kabuki theater play where it actually turned out one of the stage hands was the murderer and had killed somebody. That's where the idea of this assassin clad in midnight blue comes from. It was just a traditional Japanese kabuki theater play.
That's interesting. And to think a twist, you could almost like, that's almost like a twist these days that would piss off the audiences for being too meta.
Yeah.
Like, I'm trying to figure out which character it was, and now you tell me it's the bloody stagehand.
Yeah.
Obviously, we weren't considering the stagehands because that's not a thing.
Exactly.
I want my money back.
And it's and again, before we had fourth wall breaks, because that relates to TV, doesn't it?
Yeah.
They used to call it meta theater.
And that's that. Popular more recent one, Women in Black.
Yeah, I mean, a great example is everything that happens in A Midsummer Night's Dream with the crude instrumentals is all very meta theatrical. And yeah, no, I've just always loved that because people think of ninjutsu, but ninjutsu is a very modern martial art. I'm pretty sure it might have even been invented in America, which is loosely based on a lot of other martial arts, and they gave it the ninja name to make it sound cool.
Right. Fair enough. I mean, it's more than I know about it, to be fair.
Yeah. I mean, again, that's kind of special interest, isn't it?
Yeah. And I think martial arts is one of those things that people know like little tidbits about, but not many people know anything more than that. But that's why, again, the appeal of this time period is like ninjas. People are like, oh, that's cool. Like, don't need to know more. Just ninjas is cool.
100%. And who has watched a Bruce Lee film and not enjoyed it?
Another interesting crossover with the Daredevil comic to TMNT is the main antagonist of it is Shredder, but he's head of the Foot Clan. Yeah. The reason they're called the Foot Clan is because the ninja secret organization in Daredevil is called the Hand. So Eastman and Laird were like, what should we name our version of the Hand? The Foot? And I was like, yep, that's it now. The Foot Clan for decades afterwards.
That's
now
so
the Foot
good.
Clan.
I didn't realize that.
So I did make some notes about like the writing and story and everything of the original comic.
Yeah, we can chat about it.
But no, what I was going to say is I don't feel like it's worth critiquing because it's so of its time. Yeah, like when we did the Alan Moore Superman one, it was like we didn't really kind of be like, oh, this dialogue's a bit stilted or a bit unnatural. It's like because that's just what they were at the time.
It's from the 80s, yeah.
But we commented what was interesting and different about it. And I think we've covered with this older one, like it was surprisingly violent for the time, violent for involving like a grown anthropomorphic, animal man hybrids and everything. So
I would argue that and I think you'd probably agree with me, it's well worth a read.
Yeah, if you're interested really at all.
If you are currently reading the Amazing Spider-Man run from 2022, for instance, I would say that this is a much more interesting read. If you're currently reading any modern Marvel or DC superhero comics that isn't Supergirl, I would definitely say this is like much more interesting than what you're reading right now. Which other superhero ones have I liked? I liked Supergirl, didn't I? Woman of Tomorrow.
Yeah, you liked Rogue Sun.
I liked Rogue Sun. Isn't Woman of Tomorrow going up for an award soon?
Yeah, it's going up for a Hugo Award.
Yeah,
science fiction award. Yeah.
Whoever the fuck gets to choose, it should win. It's good.
Well, there's one other one in there that we might be doing soon, so that might be like a contender as well.
Whisper off, Mike. Oh yeah, that's going to be really fun, isn't it?
Yeah. Well, hopefully.
But yeah, no, if you are into like modern superhero comics and one of the things that you like about them is an ensemble cast taking on a big bad, then the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtle comic from 1984 is inarguably better than everything you're reading at the moment. I'm sorry, it just is.
I think what's especially interesting for me as a superhero fan is seeing the tropes of the superhero comics of the 80s really like condensed and like
and amplified to the point that they're pastiche.
And that's really interesting because you see those tropes, like how they've evolved since then. You go, oh, that's crazy. Like I do my one complaint, and it goes a little bit further into like issues 5, I think. 4 or 5. They leave New York like way too early.
Whoa,
so for the very first,
New York.
Yeah, and I won't spoil how because you'd never guess. Guess how. But for how early it started, for issue 4. I feel like the whole Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles in New York, the sewers of New York, is like such an integral part of the characters.
Yeah, 100%.
And I feel like at that point they just set to New York just because. I think because Daredevil's set in New York, so they were just like same as. It didn't feel like they thought of it as an integral part, so they just left New York very quickly afterwards, like 4 issues.
It's interesting how important setting becomes to certain superhero comics. Like Spider-Man
needs to be somewhere with skyscrapers.
Yeah, if Peter Parker had been bitten by the spider in Norwich, with its tallest building being the medieval cathedral, his powers would have been nerfed somewhat.
Well, if you go by the Spider-Man games, he would have done a thing called Zip Web, which is where he basically fires his web in the way, and then like just something further away, and then because of his strength, he yanks himself through the air. So he just kind of does it and just goes like imagine like you trying to pull a rope. But he pulls himself forward.
Yeah.
So he'd just be doing that everywhere.
Which implies that the bonds that bind his webs to the things he shoots them at are stronger than he is.
Yeah, they stick. Yeah, it's proportionate steel strength.
Right, okay.
Yeah. Spider's web, because Spider's web is proportionately strong as steel. It's just so thin that it's obviously not.
Yeah, but he can hold the Brooklyn Ferry together.
Yep.
Which is more, that would take more than a few bits of steel.
Yeah. Oh, yeah. It's proportionally. Like, because he can add web on top of it.
Let's not get into this. This is a fucking rabbit warren, isn't it?
Yeah.
It's a rabbit warren of superhero shenanigans that's just going to make me angry. I feel like this is kind of a superhero comic, Ryan.
It is. It's a parody of a superhero comic.
And I think The thing that makes me not call superhero shenanigans is the fact that they're turtles that like pizza.
Yeah.
Like, they charm me. I
Yeah.
find them interesting and charming in a way I don't most superheroes. But it is pure superhero shenanigans, isn't it?
There's something where I think we said before about something to do with humor or comedy where you like it when... I said before, and I think you agreed, where it's you like intelligent people doing silly comedy but they can't help but be intelligent through the silliness.
Yeah.
I think this comes into like earnestness and like parody, like ridiculousness.
Yeah.
So in the ridiculous setting, there is still this earnest family dynamic and, these oddities who found each other and have made their own surrogate family. And those are the things I think that keep it earnest despite all the craziness and everything else.
So, just recently, you told me about an idea you'd had, which is for superhero shenanigans bingo cards.
Yes.
That we can do during the episodes to keep me happy mostly when we're talking about superheroes.
It's to give you something else to focus on.
Yeah. And my first superhero shenanigans trope was going to be dead parental figure.
Yeah, yeah.
And then in the Last Ronin...
I mean, that's dead family. That's entire family.
Still a dead parental figure. Even though the entire family's dead, the parental figure's dead too.
Yeah, but that's got to be part of an origin. Like, the trope, I think, is more origin.
And this is kind of Michelangelo's new origin story.
Yeah, but it's not his origin.
So
we're debating semantics.
We are being presented with a narrative here, right? When you are analysing a narrative, you have to analyse the narrative that has been put in front of you. We are seeing the origin story for not Michelangelo, one of the ensemble cast of turtles that we've always seen before. We are seeing depressed Michelangelo, whose family has died. Part of this new origin story for this new character is a dead parental figure. It's straight Batman, Spider-Man shenanigans.
I think you're picking out bits of information to support your hypothesis.
Well, of course, that's how arguments work. That's how we form arguments.
But it's not how you empirically arrive at something or other, something sciencey.
Oh, yeah, because objectivity exists, doesn't it?
I think...
I was told recently about something that made me really happy. I can't remember the thinker's name. She was a feminist. And she basically said that she did a thought experiment which she said proved there was no such thing as objectivity. She said the only objective truth is God, and God does not exist. Therefore, there is no objective truth.
Okay, I will counter-argument with my subjective take to your subjective take.
Yeah.
I think that...
Which is wrong.
This being I mean, you're not, but... people who are right generally don't go around saying how right they are all the time. They don't announce it. I will let the readers decide. Readers, listeners.
You're definitely wrong.
I'm wrong about readers. But, for example, I think a good example that I'm pulling out of my ass right now is...
Oh, please don't.
The
listeners don't have to look at you, but I do.
You have to deal with it. There's like a Bond...
Oh, God, it's coming out, guys.
There's a Bond film where he gets married and then the wife is killed. And that becomes
on Her Majesty's Secret Service.
And that's the plot of that film, right?
Yeah.
You wouldn't then say, Bond having a dead wife is part of his origin. Because it's just the continuation of the story in the franchise. That's my example of why I don't treat this as that. There's a lot of superhero shenanigans. I just don't think that one applies in this particular instance.
It does, though, doesn't it? This is the thing.
It's motivation for this story, and I'd say the trope that not even necessarily specific
because
trope,
the profound difference here is that when Tracy dies, that's Bond's wife, she is a character who turns up for one Bond novel. Yeah,
I mean, she was essentially a comic term. She was fridged.
Yeah, absolutely. But what we're seeing here is a character that we have seen in an ensemble cast for 40 years. And now we're seeing them completely on their own.
Yes.
So it's a complete change of format. You could almost argue that it's a spin-off. This isn't a straight continuation of the Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles series. And so I would argue that actually, even though this isn't the exact origin story for Michelangelo as a character entirely, the fact that he is a different character than the one we have seen in previous iterations. And that is because of this new origin story where all of his family, including his only parental figure, have done a die.
So I think we're debating semantics.
I'm ticking it off.
No, you're not, because it's not his origin.
I'm ticking it off.
You're using the word origin haphazardly. You're like, well, it's the beginning of this book, so it's a new origin. It's like, no, there's one origin. It's the origin of the character. Spider-Man, Gwen Stacy dying, Spider-Man, that's not part of his origin. Uncle Ben is the parental figure who died in his origin.
I mean, I know nothing about it, so I'm just going to say Gwen Stacy dying is origin story. Because that serves my argument, and there's no such thing as objective truth.
You can't keep creating the origin after the title has started.
Is that not how origin works?
It's not an origin.
This is the spiciest opinion I've had in a while.
I think again, the problem is we're debating the semantics of the trope.
And that's not interesting.
No, not as much. But I would genuinely like to hear what people think. What side they fall on in this argument.
It's mine.
This debate.
It's mine, obviously.
Well, there's going to be some idiots, obviously, but the smart ones will come to me.
To tell you that you're wrong.
It's just go back. Well, actually, I'm rubbering your glue. So we're just going to keep going back for all of that. One thing I thought was the last one, I think you'll agree with this. There is a trope in itself of the tragedy struck, and there's a future dystopian version of a character riddled with tragedy that's now fighting for last hurrah. Yeah. And the closest example I could think of, which I think you also read, was Old Man Logan.
Yeah.
So that I got a lot from.
Definitely got that vibe, yeah.
There's
I agree.
Definitely some others as well. I'm trying to think of like dystopian future, where a character's been thrust forward. Write in if you know them, but there's definitely other ones. I think it's not just Old Man Logan.
I mean, it kind of ties in, not entirely, but there's a similar vibe to whatever his face was, The Flash. Kind of a character in either a dystopian future or an alternate version of their reality. And it kind of had that same feeling where Michelangelo felt like he was a visitor there.
Yeah.
It was a world that he hadn't quite come to understand or be able to function in properly yet.
I think this one and Old Man Logan, I think they function as like a kind of trying to do something new with an existing character. Like,
100%.
What if they were in the future and basically their family died in Old Man Logan? Spoilers for that, but it's been out for ages. He kills all the X-Men. He's tricked into killing them. So that's his tragedy propelling him into this. And this one is obviously all the family dying. I did like that it was a bit more intricate in how the rest of the family died.
Normally, God, it was wrenching, wasn't it?
I was expecting just one big battle, and they all died, and Mikey survived. In this, it was kind of most of them died in an explosion.
Yeah,
and then it was Splinter and Donatello who were in Japan for the peace summit between clans, and it felt like an added wrench of the knife. Yeah, it's like, oh, you might be able to rescue your dad and your brother, your last brother. Oh, they're dead now as well. Like it felt like it was a bit of a addition.
It turned the tragedy up to 10, didn't it?
Yeah. One thing that's interesting about the story as well is I thought when I first saw the front page of Last Ronin and seeing Eastman and Laird in the story, I thought, and I didn't know this, I thought, fuck no, have they been writing this since the 80s? And it turns out half yes. One of them has. I think it's Eastman has continued writing. Laird left and sold his shares in 2009. So they did a pretty decent run of the original duo.
Me.
But what's interesting is the reason he's credited on Last Ronin is when him and another guy, I think Tom Waltz, I think his name was, who's come on since and is now part of it. They were like, hey, what do you want to do? Because they handed over the main title run that's been going on since the 80s. So literally it said like 80s to like 2014 and then went to IWD publisher. They were like, hey, we've handed over the main run to someone else, give it a fresh new whatever, and someone else have a go. Let's do something else. And then Eastman was like, well, me and Laird wrote this one back in maybe the 80s or the 90s. They're like, let's do this then. So it was written back then as like the possible end of the franchise before it become very popular potentially.
No shit.
Yeah.
So they've had this tucked away that entire time.
Yeah. And they've obviously changed up and stuff.
That's
and
fucking cool, Ryan. Yeah. I didn't know that.
And what's a nice little thing, Eastman apparently called Laird. He was like, I've got this that we wrote. Do you mind if we make it if we actually produce and publish it for now? And apparently Laird was like, yeah, go ahead, Philly Boots. So
it sounds great. Yeah. That's so cool. This is like prime. I mean, we're we're 39 years on, and we are getting primary source material from this franchise.
Yeah.
This is the equivalent of getting a new 1990s Pokemon game that they forgot to release, isn't it?
It's like...
and then being like, oh, by the way, this is a whole 100 Pokemon that we designed in 1995. We've just cleaned them up a bit and stuck it on this Nintendo Switch cartridge. Here you go.
It's like there's like meant to be Prince stuff coming out soon because he had a whole vault of unreleased music and videos.
He recorded a song a day.
Yeah, so whoever owns his estate were like, we could just keep releasing stuff from him that's completely unseen and like, you know, just keep the spirit alive, you know?
Yeah.
But it definitely explains for me on the negative side, the dialogue seems to be the same as the 80s one.
Which I kind of liked. I kind of liked the consistency.
I don't know how I think I was
I get it. I understand.
For something a bit better.
Yeah.
But that's the one area for me that fell short. And I think it was just unnaturalistic dialogue. Everything else, story, I really enjoyed.
Yeah.
I thought all the story beats and as it happened and the revelations and the characters coming back, I thought was like prime dystopian future. Some people survived, some people didn't. Introduction of a character, Casey, the daughter of April.
Yeah.
I liked especially...
And Casey at the very end with those 4 turtles.
Yeah, I was going to say that.
Oh my God. Oh, it just made me... Oh.
And obviously, biggest spoiler for the thing, but Michelangelo dying at the end.
And did that make you feel something?
I felt like I kind of expected it, so it didn't hit quite as hard, but the bit where he's waking up with all his brothers and stuff, I was like,
oh my God.
This is like, that in itself is a bit of a superhero shenanigan trope for when they die.
Yeah, I know.
Starting from Gladiator, that thing, like the family and the Reeds and stuff, it was like that. But I still felt like having known these characters for so long, it felt good.
I was super willing to forgive this. It's superhero shenanigans. I was so willing to forgive it.
Well, as I said, story-wise, again, really enjoyed it.
Yeah.
I enjoyed the art. I'm going through like the pillars of what we kind of review on.
I liked the art. I mean, again, I thought they made Michelangelo look really fucking mean.
Yeah, design-wise, I love that design. There was one of, I think it was the director's cut version of issue 1. Had the breakdown of like the actual character and all the stuff. So it had like goggles, black hood, black like face mask, carrying the 4 face masks and all the weapons, the weapons being broken, especially the swords.
Yeah.
So all those little details were really cool. And it just, for me, this is me being a bit of a negative Nancy here, I felt like you put this great attention to detail in these parts, but the dialogue at some points just felt so like we need to get this bit of exposition into this page.
Absolutely.
I made a note. And again, I don't want to be like the arsehole who's like, I don't like the dialogue, but there was
be that arsehole. When I don't like things, I'm fucking vocal about it, right?
But I feel bad about it because I enjoyed so much of the rest of it.
Yeah.
I don't feel like I'm not trying to like take a shit on it because I didn't like it. I'm like, I felt almost like I had higher expectations and this one area fell down a little
And there's
bit.
nothing worse than something not meeting expectations, right?
Yeah. Not mad, I'm just disappointed.
Yeah, well, exactly, yeah, and that's valid.
But again, all the other parts were great. It was just like, this is an example of one line, and you'll know exactly what I mean. It was towards the end, but there was a line of April and Casey talking. They need to find Mikey later because they need to be with him for when he dies. And April goes, oh, speaking of, he has no clue, but I injected a tracker into Mikey when I drew his blood. I meant to tell you before, but you kind of took off on me.
It's like...
It just feels like, oh shit, we need to put that in and we need to explain why it wasn't mentioned earlier. And there was a lot of bits like that were just...
Expositional dialogue,
bit of extra work could have made that a bit more... and a lot of other parts a bit more naturalistic.
Yeah, you didn't need to tell me that. You could have shown me that. And I agree with you. And I completely agree with you. And I agree that it's... I think it stood out so much because the artwork looked so good. It looked so crisp.
Yeah. I think in most parts, they were just talking. It was just kind of passable art, like he was doing the job. The fight scenes I thought were good. They had good little proportions of all the characters and the swings and the kicks and everything. The art I liked the most was, so there was the normal flashbacks. For some reason, there's the flashbacks where it was like New York flashbacks.
Yeah.
Or even Japan flashbacks. There was flashbacks where it was just a sepia tone.
Yeah, and they're my favourite.
Felt a bit old, like an old film reel kind of feel. And then there's the flashbacks where it's Mikey by himself. And for some reason, they went, let's like do really artistic, beautiful, harrowing, like dream-like, nightmare-like.
I mean, it dragged me straight back to Nice House in the Lake.
Yeah, definitely, yeah. And the contrast, I mean, Nice House in the Lake was a bit more...
It was arty all the time, whereas this stuck out like a sore thumb, didn't
exactly. The Nice House in the Lake like mellowed between pages and panels. This was like flashback, sepia tone, like, all right, bit of a... that's cool. That's just a trope in television film as it is.
Yeah.
And then... and then Mike's like, then I went into the mountain and I was cold-blooded, so that was particularly harsh on me. I read that line, I was like, I hadn't thought of that.
That's
Fair
funny.
enough. That's funny, and it makes sense. But then he's like, and I went into the mountain and I was cold and I was alone. I didn't know what to do. And it's just all the like proper like black and white, like really interesting looking art. So I really like that part.
I kind of wish the entire comic was like that.
Yeah.
Do you know how dope would that have been if the entire comic looked like those flashbacks?
Or at least more in that style.
Right?
Yeah.
It would have been really cool. With a name like The Last Ronin as well, because that sounds to me like it sounds like a 1980s martial arts film.
Yeah, exactly. And
Bruce Lee starring in The Last Ronin.
Yeah, 100%. And I think that's why it's...
Do you know what a Ronin is as well?
So they describe it in the comic, and I don't know if that's accurate or not, but he described it as being the last of his clan. Like, that was why he was calling himself that?
Yeah, so that's one of the reasons that you would end up a Ronin. Ronin was just the name for a samurai who wasn't serving a particular feudal master.
Right.
So feudal lords would hire these great swordsmen to either protect them or to serve them. And if you were a swordsman of high renown, but you weren't affiliated with any particular feudal lord, or you weren't running an army, you were known as a Ronin.
Right. So it kind of makes sense that his master's died now.
Absolutely, yeah. No, him using that term makes perfect sense. It's just not completely accurate as to what the old Japanese word means.
Yeah. I especially liked, now I'm looking through the arc now, the bits where all the explosions were going off, I thought were really well done, really well detailed. I loved the concept of, I guess, technically Shredder Jr. or Shredder Jr. Like, he's Shredder's grandson, essentially, but he has this suit that's like liquid armor. And as soon as I saw that, I thought, all right, it's going to be really hard to beat, and then like a big explosion of stuff. And then I like they thought about, again, real attention to detail in this part and not in other parts. But Mikey was like, right, if I do an explosion, so I use this like bomb on part of his armor, I think it was like his hand, that's going to go off, weaken it, and then I'm going to strike immediately after the explosion because it can only take so much damage to repair from. So literally, bomb goes off, and then he puts a sai straight into Shredder Jr.'s hand, and then he takes out, and it's healed again. He's like, well, fuck's sake, like, I'm going to need more than that. And he's like, you must be bleeding on the inside there. And you see like him working out and figuring out like what he needs to do, and eventually just has to blow him up in the river.
Yeah.
But enough to like trap the air or whatever so he can't breathe. But again, like details in some parts, which I really appreciated. A lot of violence in this, so harkens back to the original quite a bit as well.
I mean, again, I said earlier, didn't I? I kind of thought, oh, this is a really fun, gritty reimagining of the Turtles. Then I started reading the original. I was like, fuck no, this is just...
back to basics.
Yeah, this is on brand for them. I mean, it's given me a whole new respect for the brand. And it's definitely made me want to jump into it more. I
think you can definitely see why this title has been like celebrated.
Yeah, because it's been really well received, hasn't it?
Yeah, a lot of people have said, like, even just by comic sales, like it's the most popular Teenage Mutant Turtle comic for a while.
Can you imagine like having gotten onto this in the pandemic as well, being like, I know there's a fucking virus going on. Have you read this shit?
Unfortunately, there was a whole, I don't know if I've mentioned this on the thing before, but there was a whole problem with actual physical publishing and printing of comics.
Yeah, makes sense.
And they stopped for a while, and I actually dropped off for a while because I didn't know when they started again.
So were they just not all working from home producing comics and then just publishing them digitally?
I think that individuals were making comics, but they just literally couldn't put them together to actually publish them and release them. For some reason, that also impacted that they couldn't do it digitally. I'm not sure why.
Because TV slowed down for a bit, didn't it?
Oh yeah, they couldn't meet up and actually make new TV, could they?
Although Zendaya was in that film that was shot entirely during the pandemic, wasn't she?
Yeah, and they did Michael Sheen and David Tennant. They did the one from Home, didn't they?
Yeah.
The over Zoom. There was a horror movie that was made over Zoom as well somehow.
Yeah.
So there were creative workarounds, but yeah, there was definitely a slowdown. For some reason, it affected digital comics as well, and I'm not sure how.
I didn't realise. I just assumed that. To be honest with you, I assumed that these companies would have gone, fuck, everyone's at home, everyone's got disposable income, let's churn out some content.
I think whatever system they had in place required people meeting up somehow to get comics published digitally. There was a point in the chain or system.
Well, I suppose
you'd
need to have a print shop open, wouldn't you? And I imagine that would have been not deemed to be.
But then would the print shop not just be physical copies? Like, that's the problem I'm kind of having in determining
this is
why.
it, isn't it? Because you think they'd have just upped their digital output. That's what I would have done if I were them. Are you Googling it?
Yeah. In the meantime, while I searched up, did you know, how did you find Michelangelo's, like, the whole personality in this?
I mean, again, dialogue stilted. And I was kind of in that first issue trying to guess which turtle it was. And I was like, well, it can't be Mikey because he's not quippy enough. And so...
But then the point was he didn't seem like any of them for that first issue reveal.
Yeah, absolutely. I think his personality came through a bit more after the first issue, didn't it?
The what, sorry?
His personality came through a bit more after the first issue.
Oh, yeah, once they'd made the reveal, yeah, for sure. I bring up myself because there was one part there was only kind of one part where I thought that's the old Mikey there, and obviously the reason he's different is the point of the title, so it makes sense that he's rarely himself after all he's been through. The one part I noticed it was when he was fighting Casey, when he was showing,
yeah,
and it was definitely a more older, bitter version of him, but he had that little quippiness came out, and like you could see him kind of relaxing into like his old self. And I feel like that's because training ninjutsu with someone is like his growing up, his entire history with his family. Like,
well, I mean, right at the start of the original 1984, Donatello's trying to watch TV with Splinter, and Mikey and Raph are scrapping.
Yeah, but definitely in like, I think it's like parallels with like sibling scrapping, but also they are training their martial arts, like they're sparring essentially.
And I can't watch TV with you guys sparring in the living room.
And then one of them just gets thrown across into a bookshelf, like.
And I'm that was Mikey and Raph, wasn't it?
Yeah, but so there's a scene where he's doing that with Casey, and he's showing Casey like, you don't know shit. Like you've done well for a human, but you're nothing compared to
only
me.
A true turtle can be a ninja.
Well, basically.
It's fucking weird, man. It's like, again, it shouldn't work. It shouldn't be compelling. It just shouldn't, should it? It's too silly.
It's why it works. It's all these silly things coming together, but being earnest in the telling as well.
Yeah, exactly. And I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it. Genuinely, I was surprised at how much I enjoyed it. Because I noticed so much comic book shenanigans. So much superhero shenanigans.
Yeah.
And by virtue of it just being the Turtles, particularly it being one of my favourite Turtles, I just kind of forgave it and just got on board with it and just kind of enjoyed watching him go through his journey. I would highly recommend it. I would highly recommend both.
Yeah, if you're a fan of the franchise, the differences between the two over so long is so
interesting.
Yeah, it's
so interesting.
And the 80s one is like a whole description of it's a whole representation of superhero comics at the time as well, and pulpy comics at the time and everything. And this one now, it feels like it shows how much it's become its own thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
And I think the thing that made it its own thing, it wasn't the teenage stars, it wasn't them being ninjas, it wasn't them being mutants or even turtles. It was they are characters with their individual personalities who have a adopted rat dad and they like pizza and they fight crime. Yeah. Like, I think those are the things that the intangibles that made it popular.
Yeah.
And have given it its own identity all these years later, decades later.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I completely agree with you.
Feel like that's a good place to call it?
I think so. So, thank you so much for listening, as always. If you'd like to leave us a review, just do so wherever you listen to your podcasts, and we'd be really thrilled with it. If you'd like to send us an email and actually talk to us directly, you can do that at thecomicliterate@gmail.com.
You can tell us why you agree with one of us or why Jamie's wrong. You can either or is fine.
Yeah, absolutely. And thank you so much for listening.
I thought you were like whirling and like, how can I get back at him before the end?
No, the end of the podcast is where I get to be earnest for a minute.
Okay.
And so I'm just enjoying being a bit earnest, actually.
Well, before you proper sign off, I will get back to the why the comics ended the pandemic. It turns out it's a bit of a thing and I'm going to have a proper read in it. But I think we're going to get into it in the next one.
Okay, cool. I'm really glad you interrupted.
Your flow?
Yeah, absolutely.
All right, we'll start again from the beginning. Right. It was like jazz, isn't it?
It's jazz, baby. No. We're not starting again. I'm just going to say...
No, the entire episode.
Oh,
like,
dude, I have shit to do. I've got to pick fleas out of a cat. Thank you for listening. And I hope whatever you're doing with your morning, day, or evening, you continue to enjoy doing it after we leave you. Or if you're binging this, thank you so much for binging it. And enjoy the next one. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you. Goodbye.
Bye.